I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It is a big Tuesday show. We are wrapping up our division previews with the AFC East. Games are just around the corner. We will actually have the first game on Thursday when we will be back doing a redraft mock draft, but there is just a lot going on in the league right now. What does it mean to you, Dennis? Are you excited about all the football action finally taking place?
I am excited. It's on multiple levels for me. My son has been doing off-season conditioning all summer long, and they're in a week-long break Thursday. He's back at football practice in earnest. They've got 8 practices and then a scrimmage. Ohio State reports to camp on Thursday. We got the Hall of Fame game on Thursday. We got us an awesome show to do on Thursday talking about this mock draft we're doing. I'm, despite the fact I don't get to see, and this is me speculating, I don't get to see Jared Goff or Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown or Sam Laporta or Jamison Williams this Thursday. I am excited to maybe get a little bit of a look at Hendon Hooker. Trey Lance is going to start for the Chargers, the HOF game hero. That's where he gets most of his playing time over his career. We'll see how's Kamani Vidal look, because he's basically getting pushed down the depth chart out there. It's guys fighting for the 53rd roster spot mostly is what we're going to see on Thursday, and I can't wait.
I'm going to put it another way. If we are seeing Goff and Gibbs and Montgomery and St. Brown and Laporta, I'm going to be disappointed and Jamison Williams. Detroit, you don't need to start that in the Hall of Fame game. AET Football, thanks for reaching out. Well, Dennis, unfortunately, the injury bug continues to hit. We had a lot of news over the weekend. I'm going to divide it into 2 categories, injuries and signings. I'm going to give you the list of injuries first. You can tell me which one concerns you. The first one was Justin Fields carted off the field on, I believe it was Thursday. It gave everyone heart palpitations. Turns out he just dislocated his big toe. He is already back practicing. Joe Mixon is on the non-football injury list, and it came out this weekend that he is expected to miss some significant time. Never a great sign. Today, Isaiah Likely rolled his ankle. He is likely to be out for a little bit of time. Kenny Pickett for the Browns pulled his hamstring. Joe Flacco been taking all the QB1 reps there so far. Terry McLaurin finally showed up at camp, still wants a new contract, also went on the PUP list with an ankle injury, something to monitor there. And Treylon Burks, we got word first, they played with our emotions. On Wednesday, Cam Ward said he really liked what he was seeing from Treylon Burks, thought it was going to be his year. On Thursday, or maybe it was Friday, broke his collarbone, and then over the weekend was released, ending his time with the Titans. Kind of the roller coaster of emotions. For me, I think the most concerning one is Joe Mixon, just because It sounded ominous the way they're talking about it, and he probably would have the biggest fantasy impact. Terry McLaurin feels like maybe a little bit of gamesmanship because he wasn't going to
Once he
report
signs
for the
that
year before.
contract,
Yeah,
that ankle's going to feel a lot
feels
better.
The other ones, Justin Fields scared us, but seems like he's okay. Isaiah Likely probably going to bounce back. I don't know if Kenny Pickett or Treylon Burks really were moving the fantasy needle, but how are you feeling about all the injury news?
Well, I think what Cam Ward liked seeing from Treylon Burks was clearly him packing his bags. I mean, I understand the philosophy behind what Tennessee did. Did it blow up in their face and was an abject failure? Yes, it was. But they had a big-time wide receiver that has a little bit of a knee issue, that was ready for a new contract. They didn't want to pay him what he wanted. They were like, well, we'll move him. We've got a replacement coming in this draft. Let's go get that. We'll reset it. Teams do that with players all the time, different positions and stuff. They'll just keep cycling through I think the Chargers do it with safeties a lot, or maybe it's the Rams do it with safeties. They never re-sign their own safeties. They just keep drafting new ones. And, their contract's up. They move on to the next one. It just didn't pan out. Burks, on paper has a lot of very similar traits to A.J. Brown, just never translated to the field in the NFL. I expect he'll get another shot. I don't expect anything will come from it. I think he's going to, he is the wide receiver version of Josh Rosen, and I think he'll end up bouncing around from a few teams. Mixon, I agree, is the most concerning, in part because, we haven't heard a lot of great stuff about how Nick Chubb looks, so the Texans could conceivably be down to Dario Gumbawale and Woody Marks to start the season. Damian Pierce is out. If Pierce gets back, maybe I feel a little bit better. Nick Chubb, great story, but, has had some very severe injuries and is 30 years old. And while I want him to be successful, he's not a guy I'm chasing in drafts. Mixon has basically scared me off. I'm of the camp now that I'm going to avoid drafting Mixon, and then in season, if he gets back, regains his role, regains his volume, if I need to make a trade to make a run for a title, I'd be willing to do that. But he's essentially on my avoid list right now. I think McLaurin's, maybe he's got a little ankle issue. I suspect it's not bad enough to keep him out of practice, but the contract issue is really what's keeping him out of practice. And with Isaiah Likely, I just don't think the Ravens have any impetus to rush him back. They have Charlie Kohler as their tight end 3, who they like. Mark Andrews, all I could think of was Mike Williams, and I'm like, that's not who it is. Mark Andrews came on at the end of the season, looks good, still got a lot in the tank, so they can go a few games into the regular season with Andrews and Kohler and not really change what they're doing. And if we look back at last year, they're not really, Likely is only relevant when it seems when Andrews is out. He'll have a catch here or there, maybe catch a touchdown, but when Andrews is healthy, he's not grabbing a ton of volume. And with the onset of Rashad Bateman, they have Zay Flowers, and they've added DeAndre Hopkins. It's getting crowded in that low passing volume receiver room in Baltimore. So I don't think there's any rush to get Likely back. I do think this may be the last season for Mark Andrews in Baltimore. And so for them, I think they know what they have with Likely. They're looking to next year. He may miss a couple games at the beginning of the season, but I don't think he misses a ton. It was going to be Pickett or Flacco to start the season, in my opinion, anyways. I think they were given Pickett because he's young, the opportunity to try to win the job. But I think that the Browns are very happy to roll into the season with Joe Flacco as their QB1 and wait for Pickett to come around. If Flacco falters, they'll slide Pickett right in and I think keep on trucking. You know, what we expect at best a 500 season, old school 500 season. Justin Fields will be fine. He tweaked his toe, may give him a little bit of issue. It seems like it's one of those things, if it persists throughout the season, that he'll just get a shot before every game.
You know, the interesting thing with Likely, they say he's likely to miss a couple of weeks, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's, you know, available by week 1 because we are fortunately still in July. Andrews, Likely, and Cole are all entering contract years. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how things play out and then see what they want to do this offseason. We did get a couple of signings. The Bengals finally signed Shamar Stewart, the last first-round rookie to sign. So that part's done. They're still, you know, haven't gotten the deal done with Trey Hendrickson, but they got to feel a little bit better about that. Cowboys announced a massive 4-year extension for tight end Jake Ferguson, which led to a lot of upset at Cowboys camp because they still haven't done a deal with Michael Parsons. Also led to Stephen Jones saying some just dumb things. Apparently the apple doesn't fall far from the tree there in Dallas. And Cortland Sutton got a 4-year, $92 million extension from the Broncos. He was entering a contract year. I think Dallas is stupid. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not surprised they extended Ferguson. I'm surprised that they're doing everybody and their brother before Micah Parsons. I was most excited about the Sutton one because I love Sutton. I think he's been a great number 1 there, and I was curious to see what they were going to do. They cleared out most of the veteran receivers that had been acquired prior to Sean Payton. Sutton was the last one left. They've been drafting young guys, but I think this extension makes a lot of sense for Denver considering they didn't look at any of the free agents. They drafted Pat Bryant, but I wouldn't say that was a huge, move, a big early drafting. A lot of people thought that they were going to perhaps draft a big time receiver and let Sutton go. But I think this extension shows that he's in their plans. And then, he becomes the veteran in a group where they have some good young options with Mims and Troy Franklin and Devon Vele and Pat Bryant. So it makes me kind of excited about what they're building around Bo Nix.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a huge Cortland Sutton fan. I've been, I'm team big wide receiver. He's one of these 6'3", 215 guys. Good speed, if not the fastest guy, but he's got good speed. He's a good route runner. To me, when you look around at that core, they've got a second-year quarterback, a veteran wide receiver to lead the receiving room. They brought in Evan Ingram to be their top tight end. You've got Mims, Vele, and while Vele is a little older because he went on his mission, Franklin and then Bryant, you've got this group of young guys now that there's an unquestioned leader in the room. And I like that setup. It's a 4-year extension?
Yep.
Will he be the alpha in the 4th year of this contract? Probably not. I would expect one of these young guys is going to step up. They may, see a couple of the young guys fizzle out, go out and draft another stud wide receiver. But they've got a really, really solid set of skill players now with Harvey and Dobbins, Ingram, Sutton, Vele, Mims, Franklin, Bryant. And Bo Nix, they've worked to put a team around him to let him continue to be successful after, frankly, a kind of surprising year 1. Yeah. So if they can keep him upright, keep that offensive line, playing well, Cortland Sutton should have another very good year. Who will break out as the number 2? I think there are a lot of people that expect it to be Evan Ingram to be the second highest receiving target there. but I wouldn't be surprised to see Mims get an uptick in volume, or Franklin come on. I think Franklin kind of is a bit of a deep threat kind of guy, so he may not. But Vele's sort of a big slot guy. They have some options, so I really like that. So here. Well, I'm not coming out in support of the Cowboys. What I would say is they know how much money they have to spend. And when you've got more than one guy that's due for a contract, you're going to be negotiating with several players. The fact that Ferguson's deal got done, I don't think it says, oh, we're not talking to Micah Parsons. What it says is the Parsons deal is a lot more complicated. There are a lot more dollar signs on it. There's a lot bigger things, and we're further apart. We got to hammer out more details. There's a lot more work. We're working on it. This other deal just got done because they said, hey, what Ferguson signed for 54 or 52? He's like, fuck yeah, I'll sign that. So I don't know. But to me, that's just sort of how it feels.
It's not the Ferguson contract. It's Stephen Jones saying bullshit like Micah Parsons has to want to be paid. I mean, those are the where they're trolling. It's not
what it is.
It's not the move itself, though. It's the constant trolling, because they began this like training camp situation with Jerry essentially trolling the value of Micah Parsons and Dak Prescott. So I guess I'm mildly surprised they did such a long-term contract with Jake Ferguson, because he had a good year, but then, he's just been okay the last couple of years. But I think he's a fine player, and I obviously see him as a piece that they want to keep. It's just, I don't think that it feels like needlessly they're taking shots at Micah Parsons, and I think that's playing a really dangerous game, because at some point in time, a guy might be like, no amount of money in the world is going to be worth this, because he's going to get money from some team, whether it's the Cowboys or not. And it's just, their whole offseason attitude has been curious.
It's the Cowboys front office has been a sideshow forever. And, they're one of the teams that will negotiate in the press. And you just, if you're going to be a Cowboys fan, you accept that. It's going to be frustrating. They're going to say stupid stuff. So I don't know. Can you hear that noise? Is it bad?
Bit.
Yeah. Caleb's working on his car, and so he's got a deadline. So that may pop up throughout the show. My apologies ahead of time, folks.
Well, that takes us to the AFC East, the last of the 8 divisions left to preview. Going top to bottom, the first place finisher was the Buffalo Bills. They made it all the way to the AFC Championship game, finished 13-4 last season. Amari Cooper remains unsigned, but is not back with the Bills. Mac Hollins left, went in division. They lost defensive tackle Jordan Phillips, linebacker Von Miller, and cornerback Rasul Douglas. Among their additions, they brought in Josh Palmer at wide receiver from the Los Angeles Chargers. They brought in Elijah Moore at wide receiver from the Cleveland Browns. They brought in Maxwell Harrison at corner, Joey Bosa at defensive tackle, Shaq Thompson at linebacker, and Dane Jackson at corner. Fantasy finishes last year, Josh Allen was quarterback 2. James Cook, who has his own contract situation, but it appears to have been reporting and is there. He finished as running back 8 last year. Ray Davis was running back 40 as a rookie. Ty Johnson running back 50. Keon Coleman as a rookie, wide receiver 71. Khalil Shakir, who got an extension this offseason, wide receiver 37. Joshua Palmer was wide receiver 74 for the Chargers. Elijah Moore, wide receiver 67 for the Browns. And Dalton Kincaid was tight end 30. Josh Allen puts up a lot of fantasy points, although does a lot of it on the ground. Last year, it was kind of him and James Cook that were the most reliable. Khalil Shakir, a fairly solid, low-end wide receiver 3, high-end flex option. Do you think it changes much this year? Are you excited about the receivers they brought in? I know some people think Keon Coleman is poised to take a year or two leap. Hope springs eternal for Dalton Kincaid to be the Travis Kelce of this team, which is what we were promised when he was drafted.
So I'll start with Keon Coleman. And the only reason hope springs eternal for a second-year leap is that they didn't really do anything to address their wide receiver room. They said, we got Khalil Shakir, and he's a slot guy. He's going to play this particular role. We brought in Joshua Palmer, who will play on the outside, and he has a certain mid-level skill set. Palmer's going in the 14th round. It's not a big threat. Shakir's in the 7th round, Coleman in the 9th round, Elijah Moore in the 19th round or 20th round, and Curtis Samuel, God bless the Buckeyes, but he's injured again. That's just sort of what he does. The passing game is going to run through James Cook and maybe Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid is a good pass catcher. They've got a second tight end, so they can run 12 personnel pretty easily. But we saw Ray Davis come on.
He actually he was second on the team with 75 targets. I don't think I realized he was targeted a lot. It just doesn't feel like big production. He also missed quite a few games with injury. So maybe they were trying to feed Dalton Kincaid and we just didn't get the results we wanted.
They tried to execute the plan. He just wasn't there for it. Now, I think, Josh Allen, to quote Reggie Jackson, is the straw that stirs the drink. And he's going to get a fair amount of rushing touchdowns. They're going to use a multiple running back set. I would expect it to be kind of, 50, 30, 20 with Cook and Davis and Ty Johnson. They like Ty Johnson. He's a good pass catcher. He's got decent size. Ray Davis, friend of the show, tough runner inside, not the biggest guy. He's stocky, 5'9", 210. He showed that he could put up numbers last year if given the chance. I think that James Cook he's got to get a deal done because he's a 190-pound running back that's been carrying a pretty decent volume. He needs the second contract because the third contract is likely to not be very good. So he's trying to get as much out of this as he can. It wasn't like Cook came into the league as a first-rounder, second-round pick. Maybe he was a second-rounder. I don't remember what he was.
He was a second-round pick. Yeah.
So, he didn't have the benefit of the big money first-round deal. He needs to get as much as he can. From a fantasy standpoint, James Cook scares the hell out of me because he had that super high touchdown production last year. His 2024 season, from a passing and ground production standpoint, wasn't that out of line with previous seasons. It was just that he scored 18 touchdowns. I would be surprised if he gets 10 touchdowns total this year. I think that's going to be a win for him. And I think if you're drafting him in fantasy, you have to take that into consideration and be like, what's he going to get me if he has 1,200 scrimmage yards and 45, 50 catches and 10 touchdowns? Where do I want to draft that at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not sold that the Bills want to invest long-term, and Cook seems to want, 15 to 20 million a year. I'm glad he's in camp. That makes me feel decent for redraft. For Dynasty, I'm a little nervous. If I got a killer offer, I might think about moving on, but I still think he's going to have a good year. The Bills, it feels like they're kind of trying to push in still on that that Super Bowl window, because their time being able to completely dominate their division is probably not going to be a ton longer. The Jets are trying to make some moves. I think the Patriots are going to be better. I'm not sure about the Dolphins. We'll get to them in a minute. But, the Bills have been coasting, dominating their division for a while, and it's really been them and Baltimore and Kansas City. And, when Cincinnati can get its shit together enough to get into the playoffs, Cincinnati.
They can hold somebody under 35
They're,
points.
Yeah, there are some young teams, Houston, Denver, the Chargers, that are trying to put themselves together, maybe even the Patriots, maybe not this year, but at least by next year. I think they're putting some pieces together. I like what they're doing. And so Buffalo, I think they're trying to hang on, they're trying to push in to this year. It's going to be interesting to see, wide receiver production and depth is going to be a question. Their listed starters are Shakir, Coleman, and Palmer. And then really behind them, you mentioned Samuel already being injured, but I think they really need him because Elijah Moore probably a pretty lock to make the roster. Curtis Samuel, their backup wide receiver behind Josh Palmer, currently listed as Laviska Shenault, which would give me pause. They have KJ Hamler, Jalen Vigil, Christian Wilkinson on the depth chart. These are a lot of guys who never really materialized on the teams that drafted them that are trying to hang on. And I like Ray Davis, but I don't know that he's exactly the same kind of dynamic. Cook brings something that's completely different. He's kind of their only other big banger player on offense, like big breakaway player on offense. I think they need him this year. I don't know if they'll get a long-term deal done, but I think both sides are kind of committed to playing hard this year because Cook wants a long-term deal, if not from Buffalo, from somebody else. And Buffalo really needs him to go through because I think they still have a pretty good team.
I agree. But I'm with you. I think that window is there's not as much runway. I mean, Josh Allen's 29 years old. I get it. He's big, but Ben Roethlisberger was big. And as he started progressing through his 30s, a lot of the mobility he came into the league with went away.
Yeah. The second place team last year was the Miami Dolphins, but they were kind of a distant second, 8-9. Never really felt like a threat to make the playoffs. This offseason, veteran running back Raheem Mostert left for the Raiders. They traded tight end Jonnu Smith to the Steelers. They traded cornerback Jalen Ramsey to the Steelers. They let Javon Holland and Jordan Poyer go. They brought in Zach Wilson to potentially be the number 2 quarterback. They brought in Alexander Madison, the veteran, to add to this running back room. Veteran wide receiver Nick Westbrook was signed, kind of a number 3 guy. They brought Darren Waller out of retirement at tight end and traded for him from the Giants. They just signed Jack Jones, a player who they're getting some flack for being a character issue. And they brought back safety Minka Fitzpatrick. Last year, Tua Tagovailoa was quarterback 22, missed some time. Still a lot of questions about his long-term viability due to concussions. Devon Achane was running back 5, was really their best player on offense last year. Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 18, a little bit inconsistent, also a little bit inconsistent in the way he seemed to wave the finger at the team at the end of last season. How happy is he? How much is the off-field stuff going to be a distraction? Big questions there. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver 46, missed some time with injury. Nick Westbrook was wide receiver 54 for Tennessee. On paper, the Dolphins would seem to have a really good roster still. The things that we have liked for the last 3 years, the potential upside of Tua as a passer, the potential upside of Hill and Waddle as receivers, and the actual upside of Achane, who showed that he could carry the load last year. 203 carries, had 907 yards on the ground, saw 87 targets, caught 78 passes, combined for 12 touchdowns. He was a force on both ends. And they're going to need that because their second leading target person from last year was Jonnu Smith, who saw 111 targets, caught 88 passes. They kind of traded him for pennies on the dollar, it felt like to me. Darren Waller already on the NFI list, even after sitting out a year, is not healthy enough to go. Hill and Waddle have alternated with injuries and off field, and Hill has just seemed checked out at times. He says he's recommitted. Tua feels like he's still one hit away from being gone, and they have Zach Wilson or the rookie Quinn Ewers behind him. There's a world, I guess, I see where the Dolphins could win 11 or 12 games and be a playoff contender, but there's what feels like more likely world to me where they win 5 or 6 games and they're blowing up a lot of things this offseason.
Yeah, it all comes down to Tua's health. He missed was it 6 games last year?
Yeah, 6 games. Look it up. Yeah, he appeared in 11. So,
but I mean, he completed 73% of his passes for almost 3,000 yards. I mean, Kyler Murray would kill to throw for 3,000 yards in 11 games.
He'd kill to throw for 3,000 yards in 16 games sometimes.
Jalen Waddle is the guy that drew the short straw last year, and they were so focused on getting the ball out early that Jonnu Smith benefited, Tyreek benefited, Devon Achane benefited, and somebody had to give, and it ended up being Waddle. Well, I think Jalen Waddle is the wide receiver 1 on 18 teams in this league. He's a very, very, very good wide receiver. And so, he's going to go out, and I think he'll do everything he can. We'll have to see, does Jalen Wright step up and effectively fill the Raheem Mostert role? Mostert didn't have a ton of touches last year, only 85 carries. He did have 23 targets. So Wright will have to step up, and because as exciting as Devon Achane is, he's 185 pounds. And while I'm buying into Achane, I think that at least in redraft, I do think that he's definitely a guy that if you're gonna roster him, you want to figure out who the handcuff is, and you want to figure out, is there a handcuff, or if he goes down, is the workload going to get split? Will it end up going to Alexander Madison being the grinder and Jalen Wright being the passing down back? It ends up being that there's really those types of questions that you're going to have to solve if you're going to invest in this Dolphins offense. I think Nick Westbrook-Ikini as their wide receiver 4, I think that gives them good depth. We'll have to see, was it Malik Washington? He was a 6th rounder last year, flashed a little bit, but is he able to step up into that slot role? I don't know that there's going to be a ton of volume. Let's see who their slot guys see.
They actually are listing 3 starters right now as Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Westbrook-Ikini, with Washington listed at Malik Washington listed as a backup to Tyreek.
Okay. Well, our lad shows Ezukanma backing up Waddle, Westbrook-Ikini backing up Tyreek. Some cat named Taj Washington backing up Malik Washington. I don't know that it matters a whole lot. Washington and Westbrook-Ikini are fighting over scraps. I thought I read somewhere that the whole Darren Waller on the pup was that, he's in shape. He's just not in football shape. And they recognize that. So they're going to get him in football shape before they put him out.
That's certainly possible, but he has struggled with injuries a lot in his career.
Last few years, especially.
Yeah.
If Tua goes down, I don't know how much faith I have in Zach Wilson.
Or Quinn Ewers.
I think Quinn Ewers needs to get the treatment I said Spencer Rattler should have gotten last year. Ewers shouldn't see the field this year. Like, if they cannot play him a single snap and let him work on getting down the ropes of being an NFL quarterback, let his shoulder get healthy. He banged up his shoulders last year in college. Let that get completely healthy. Let's see where he is in understanding an NFL offense. The issue for Ewers is going to be that if that coaching staff turns over, he's a 7th round pick that the new coaching staff didn't draft, and he's likely to be, on the outs. Zach Williams, is he's a shorts guy. He should be playing flag football. He's got a big arm, can be accurate if he's not getting rushed a lot. But I don't think he processes at an NFL quality level.
I think we have to see how much that year in Denver did for him, because from what I saw of him last year, I actually would have preferred Denver keep him over Jarrett Stidham. I thought Zach Wilson looked better by all the metrics, and there was a lot of talk last year that if Bo Nix got knocked out, that they would have used Wilson. But is Mike McDaniel that coach? It's fair to wonder what the coaching and the culture and the situation was probably toxic in New York, because even with Aaron Rodgers, who most of us believe will be in the Hall of Fame, behind center, New York was a 5-12 hideous waste of a team. So maybe not everything was on Wilson. Did he learn, is he poised for a Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield like comeback after having gone someplace with real coaching and a good system? I think that's the question. That seems to be the swing that the Dolphins took, but it still makes me nervous. I don't think he's the same style as Tua either, which is going to be an interesting, switch up. Miami I have felt since the end of last season that Miami has a bad energy. And it seems like that's continued. Jonnu Smith's like, I had an incredible year. Can I get some salary recognition? And they traded him so that they can pick up a guy who unceremoniously retired on his team in training camp last year. That's probably not the attitude energy you're looking for when you already have your star receiver having given the peace sign and walked off the field at the end of week 18. And just all their comments, like we have to, Tyreek has to earn our trust back and prove he wants to be here. Look, I'm sorry, Tua, you might need him a lot more than he needs you, if we're being honest. And I really liked Mike McDaniel was a coach of the year candidate after his first year and propelled the Dolphins into a good spot, but they have kind of been bad to end 2023. They were pretty bad all year last year. And honestly, I don't know that I am not excited about Dolphins football.
Yeah, it's going to be, I just looked to see who their OC was, because we've seen some of these OCs come through and rebuild these quarterbacks. It's Frank Smith, and I'm like, I don't even know who that is. And I went and looked, and he's been there the last 4 years, so it isn't like he's a new guy. It's McDaniel running the show, and Smith is the coordinator and title. So I don't know what that's going to get Zach Wilson. Now, if Wilson started to put it together last year under Peyton and things started to click, something happens to Tua and he steps in and it clicks in Miami, that may be, now we're looking at a quarterback controversy, because you got a guy that should probably retire if he keeps getting concussions, and, former first round pick that was, by all accounts drafted into a subpar situation. It could get real interesting.
Yeah. The third place team in the East last year was those New York Jets. They finished 5-12, and they really cleaned house. All of their head coach and all their coordinators are gone. They also let go of veteran Aaron Rodgers, who was their quarterback, wide receiver Devontae Adams, who's now with the Rams, Tyler Conklin at tight end, who's now with the Chargers, Javon Kinlaw, Hassan Reddick, and DJ Reed on defense. They brought in Justin Fields, who was with Pittsburgh last year, Chicago the year before, to be kind of their new leading quarterback. They drafted Mason Taylor, an interesting tight end prospect out of LSU, and they brought in a few veterans, including Josh Reynolds at wide receiver. Reynolds split time between Denver and it wasn't Detroit. It was Denver and somebody else last year. Fantasy finishes, Justin Fields was quarterback 32, really only started the first 6 games for the Steelers, but did quite a bit in that point in time. Breece Hall, running back 16. Braylon Allen, as a rookie, running back 51. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 10, got a nice extension this offseason. Fields and Wilson were college teammates, so I think that is good. Wilson, pretty much the only thing to feel good about in the passing game, I think, for the Jets. I like potential of Mason Taylor. You have Alan Lazard and Josh Reynolds there kind of as veteran pieces. Can Malachi Corley or Xavier Gibson establish anything as a young player? I still like Justin Fields. I think he has some good QB2 upside. I still like Breece Hall. In a contract year, seems to be talking about leaving already, which makes me a little bit nervous. But I think they have some pieces. The question is, what can Aaron Glenn and this new staff do to change the culture for the Jets?
Yeah, Tanner Ekstrom's got, his hands full. He's been in Detroit with Ben Johnson, and Jared Goff could not be further away from the style of quarterback that Justin Fields is. And so I'm just throwing it out there that I think that the Jets offense isn't going to look anything like Detroit. I think Ekstrom is going to be smart enough to say, yeah, we can't do that stuff Jared Goff did. We can do some of the passing concepts, but we've got to take advantage of what Jared Goff or what Justin Fields brings to the table. It's crazy when you look at it. What Fields started the first 6 games of the year and still finished as QB 32. So that's not for nothing. Give him 16, 17 games, he could end up putting up 1,000 yards passing and 3,000 yards or 1,000 yards rushing and 3,000 yards passing. Him and Garrett Wilson did overlap by a couple of years. But they really only had one season where they were both primaries. I think Wilson's first year they were together. He was the third receiver, so he didn't get a lot of volume. They have some depth at running back behind Hall with Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. There were times last year where those guys went into the games and performed really well. I think people are hanging their hat on the Mason Taylor pedigree. It wouldn't surprise me if Jeremy Ruckert ends up with more volume in the out of the tight end position, just because he's been with the team for going into his 4th year now. And while I don't have any doubts Taylor's a pretty good tight end, it isn't like Ruckert was an undrafted free agent. He was a 3rd round pick. So, Taylor was a 2nd. And Ruckert's been there. New offense, I get it. And, he's going to have to earn. But Ruckert, let's see, when did Wilson came in, and Ruckert was in the same class as Garrett Wilson out of the Ohio State University. There's a lot of Ohio State tight ends in the NFL for a college team that doesn't use their tight ends a lot. Now, granted, the NFL teams don't use them to catch a lot of passes either. But Jeremy Ruckert, most famously coached in youth soccer by one Sal Lito of the Scott Fishbowl Podathon. Anyways, I like Brees in fantasy this year. He's was RB16. I think, he's now a couple years removed from his knee injury. I think he's looking for a contract. He's going to want to eat. I think they're going to be a run heavy team. I don't want to say to hide Fields, but let's face it, Fields hasn't proven himself as a passer. So they'll be a run heavy team. I don't know that Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis will get enough volume as backups to be viable. But I think that the narrow funnel is going to be Breece Hall, Justin Fields, and Garrett Wilson. And, I kind of expect that Alan Lazard be on his way here soon.
Part of me, I just think they're going to be a run-heavy team because Fields is going to run and because their personnel dictates it. If it's, when we're talking about fantasy, if we're talking about redraft, we're focusing on 2025, I think the only ones I feel really good about are Wilson and Breece Hall and Justin Fields. I don't know that they are going to have a wide receiver too you want. And you're right, Rucker could see some, Taylor could see some. I don't know that either of them is going to be a consistent start. Braylon Allen, I like more in Dynasty probably than redraft. So I think it's really kind of a narrow fantasy funnel. And I'll be curious to see what the Jets do. The only hesitation I have about Hall is if he's still splitting carries, and they've talked consistently about a three-headed monster back there, and you have a quarterback like Fields that runs himself, that cuts down on options. Hall actually thrived last year. He had 209 carries, but only 876 yards, which is interesting because I think the Jets' offensive line is one of the better pieces of their offense, but he really thrived because he got 76 targets and caught 57 passes. Is he going to be that kind of a pass catcher? And if not, does he get enough work as just a runner to really make it work? He is motivated to get a contract, but it also, from a lot of his comments, sounds like he's not expecting any contract to come from the Jets. So it's an interesting situation.
Yeah, in 2022, Justin Fields, started 15 games in Chicago, threw for, 2,000 some odd yards, but he rushed for 1,150. David Montgomery, who is known for being a good pass catcher, was fourth on the Bears with 40 targets. And the next, Khalil Herbert, the next running back, had 12. So he didn't throw the ball a lot to the running backs. He only attempted 318 passes for 2,240 yards. He did have 17 touchdowns in 15 games, so that wasn't all bad.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, I like Garrett Wilson, but I don't think they're going to release Alan Lazard because they redid that deal that gave them some cap relief, and they really don't have anything behind him. Josh Reynolds was not good for Denver and then ended up injured, and they were like, yeah, we were better off, and they actually released him mid-year. He's kind of like a veteran guy, but they haven't. I think the big question is, what is Malachi Corley? Because I was surprised the Jets didn't really go get any receivers in the draft, but they took Corley pretty high last year, and we were excited about him with Aaron Rodgers, and it just never materialized. Can it materialize more? I'm not ready to completely give up, but I'm not counting on a lot. The fourth place team in the East was the New England Patriots. They finished 4-13. They got rid of Gerard Mayo as their head coach. They brought in Mike Vrabel. They didn't have a lot of people leave. Cornerback Jonathan Jones is gone. Their quarterback, Jacoby Brissett, the veteran quarterback, is gone. But they brought in Josh Dobbs. to be that veteran backup. They drafted Travion Henderson to add to the running back room. They brought in veteran receiver Stephon Diggs and Matt Collins. They drafted Kyle Williams at wide receiver. They brought in a new tackle in Will Campbell, and they brought in some veterans on defense in Harold Landry at linebacker, Carlton Davis at corner. Last year, Drake May, quarterback 23, did not start the whole season, but looked pretty good down the stretch after he came in. Ramondre Stevenson was running back 28, Antonio Gibson running back 44. Both of them still there, and they have Henderson now. Demario Douglas was their top receiver, wide receiver 47. Diggs was wide receiver 64, only played 8 games for the Texans before going out with injury, was actually wide receiver 8 when he went out at the time of that injury. Kayshon Boutte finished as wide receiver 64 as well. Matt Collins, wide receiver 80, contributing for Buffalo. Hunter Henry was tight end 12. I think if Stephon Diggs is healthy, I really like him this year, and the rookie Kyle Williams mixing in, giving a better support structure to Drake May. They brought back Josh McDaniels as offensive coordinator, which might be the first time New England has had an offensive coordinator that's worthwhile since Josh McDaniels was there prior to going to the Raiders. So those feel like good things. Running back feels like, not only because of the McDaniels of it all, but because they have 3 or 4 options, that is going to be a weekly fantasy nightmare. Although I do like Henderson the most for Dynasty. But how are you feeling about this offense?
Honestly, I feel very, very good. I like Drake May's skill set. I like the addition of Diggs. Yeah, he's a diva. He diva'd his way out of Minnesota. He diva'd his way out of Buffalo. And Houston was like, he got injured. He didn't really provide us with much. So we're going to get out of the Diggs business too. But Drake May was actually QB 14 from week 6 through week 17. That's pretty reasonable. He's a decent runner. He got, let's see, what did he run? Where did I go?
421 yards last year.
And while he has stated that he wants to do a better job this year of remaining a passer longer, he said, because I could run, there were times when I probably should have, gave it another couple beats to see if somebody came open. And I think that will bode well. Right now, Mac Hollins is hurt. So Kayshon Boutte is running with the ones. You got Boutte, Diggs, and Pop Douglas. I like Kayshon Boutte. I don't think he'll ever be a wide receiver 1, but I think he can be a wide receiver 3 for fantasy if he can establish himself as the second guy there in New England. Hunter Henry is all reliable at the tight end position, and I'd like Hunter Henry a little better if Austin Hooper would stop getting himself in the mix. But what I'm really excited about is to see what kind of explosiveness that Travion Henderson brings to the team. I will say, as a lifelong Buckeye fan, the one knock on Henderson that I have is that he isn't kind of that. He's not a rub some dirt on it tough guy. He gets a little bruise, and it can slow his game down a little bit. But he's a very explosive back. He's one of the best pass blocking running backs for somebody that can ding up a quad and miss a couple weeks. Man, he's like a professional wrestler when it comes to pass blocking. He'll kick somebody's ass. But he's a great pass receiver as well. Decent inside runner, but that's really not his forte. He's kind of a one cut and go guy. I think he's going to pair pretty well with the 230-pound Ramondre Stevenson, who unfortunately, after having his phenomenal year a couple seasons ago, has not been able to repeat. I think there'll be a nice 1-2 punch. I expect the New England offense to score some points, especially relative to what they did last year. I'm putting my money on Stephon Diggs at the wide receiver spot. I think he's going to become the clear number one wide receiver on that team. I think that Kyle Williams has a ton of potential. I think if Diggs gives him 2 years and then Williams takes over as that outside guy, and you've got Williams and Booty as your anchors for the next 3 to 4 years with Travion Henderson and Drake May, I think that bodes very well for New England.
Yeah, I like their potential, which kind of leads us to, we wrap up all these division previews by talking about how we think it shakes out. I still think Buffalo wins the AFC East. I think they're still clearly the best team, but I like New England. I think New England could be one of those teams like we had last year that kind of surprises and comes up and wins like 10 games and gets into the playoff conversation. And I like the Jets to be potentially around 500, possibly in that low end playoff. The one that I'm out on is Miami. I think Miami's going to bottom out, and then I think they're going to make some wholesale changes.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Miami, they're going to have to change their GM along the way. So,
is that unfortunate?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not working what they're doing, what they're building. Mike McDaniel has had some good things that he's brought to them. He's talked a good game, but I just feel like that's kind of coming to an end. I don't like the energy on that team. I think they would do well to potentially be dismantled.
I think there's a pall that hangs over that team because of Tua's potential career-ending injury at any time, I think.
Yeah, that certainly is not helping. Well, that'll do it for us today. That's the last of the division previews. We will be back on Thursday, getting excited for the first game of the season, the Hall of Fame game, by doing
excited. I'm already excited.
We'll be going over our
redraft
mock. We are about halfway through right now. I think tomorrow I'll probably lower the clock a couple hours so we can pound out the last couple of rounds. So Thursday night,
you're on the clock.
Yep, so we can see how we are doing. But that should be a lot of fun. And then next week we will start doing redraft rankings as we get ready for drafts and the season. Next week will be quarterbacks on Tuesday, tight ends on Thursday. And the week following that, we're going to be doing the Tuesday, Wednesday thing again, looking at running backs. So getting ever closer to that season. We are going to be doing our redraft league live on Labor Day again. That was a lot of fun. So something to look out for. It's always a fun challenge for Dennis and I to be going through that while we're on the air, hoping not to get sniped. And at this point in time, we don't know where we're picking.
Professionals here, man.
Yeah, we'll end up seeing how close we are to each other. It'd be fun to be sniping each other on the air, and I put fun in air quotes. But that should do it. For people who are looking for something to fill their time during the middle of the week, what can they do?
Look, folks, you don't have a ton of time to get caught up on the summer, so you need to head over to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, and let's get her done.
There we go. Well, we'll see how many more dozens of players can get injured between now and Thursday. Training camp is here, but we will see you. It will be a game day when we are back together on Thursday. Until then, you guys have a wonderful week.